Hello everyone, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about infinite dogs, radical friends and the end of history. I'm so glad that I finally found a nice tagline for this project, but kind of like reflects how everything has been going. Trouble finding a good summary of like what the game is, and kind of having trouble like figuring out what this game is actually supposed to be. So it's kind of both. Really. But anyway, let's talk about like what happened this month or like in October, what I had planned, how things are going and what I'm like planning to do next month. So the plan was fairly simple. Finish the first area, like the first real area of the game, and don't fall into despair in face of the sheer impossibility of everything. This is how things have been going. Again, it's fairly simple. I almost finished the first area. There's still some work left to do. I'll talk about that in a moment. And I like fell into despair much less than like in September, which is also cool. Work hasn't been as like quick. Like progress wasn't as quick as I wanted it to be. But also, well, you know, stuff happens. There's like, I started taking ADHD medication like in mid-October or like earlier, first or second week of October. So it's been like roughly 2.5 weeks. And that's like taking like new medication. Like it's the same as when I started doing it, like taking antidepressants, or like when I stopped taking antidepressants, which like happened between like August and October. Is always like a process of like where like sometimes like because of side effects and other things aren't going as well as you might have wanted, so you have to adjust yourself and all that kind of stuff. And also I with like building these areas out, I occasionally run into things where I realized, hey, this isn't working as well as I wanted it to be. Let's take a step back. How do I want this to work? There's still like holes there that I need to like actually like fill on a conceptual level before I can actually start doing these things. So I needed to figure out these parts. So this is why things were like sometimes a bit slower than I thought they would be, but that's still okay. The overall goal, and let's talk about what I want to do this month, is basically write all of the dialogue and things that people will say within the first, like, basically, quote-unquote, act of the game. Build the final boss of that act for the first area. Rebuild the quote-unquote home area, which is something that's right now not in the demo, but will basically, which will be kind of like a hub / like thing where like story progresses and where you talk to people and that kind of stuff. I want to rebuild it, want to reframe it into like something slightly different, because it will be tied into like how I want like overworld progression to work and like how you like approach different areas and all that stuff. By the way, there will be overworld progression, and this is like a decision I made, and I don't know if I talked about it last month because I keep forgetting what I'm talking about. And none of this is scripted, by the way, so I can't check. So I want to push this game more in a, if you like think about like a broader term, not Metroidvania, but like action adventure platformers, like something where you explore areas where things are gated, but like where like the spaces you traverse aren't like completely linear levels, but more like things with different paths you take to like where you have to find like progression in some way or another. If you think about it like in this broader term, and you have Metroid and the Castlevania games and like other games where basically you're like exploring a contained space, something like a space station or a cave system or a castle, something like that. And on the other hand, basically another way of like doing these kinds of games is like something, and there aren't like a lot of games like this out there actually. Another way of doing this is something like Zelda 2, which I personally quite like. It's fairly rough in parts because fighting enemies, like especially early in the game, can be a bit of a slog. But what I really like about Zelda 2 is that it in my eyes nicely like combines like exploratory platforming parts, though the platforming isn't that hard in it, and just the feeling of inhabiting and traversing a larger world. Again, if you look at Metroid, sure, you are on some planet, but if you think about Super Metroid, the cave system and the stuff you explore in Super Metroid isn't the whole planet you're exploring. It is probably going only one tiny part of it, same as with, for example, Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, which is, just this cave system on this one planet. But it's not like the whole thing. And it's obviously because you cannot really communicate the scale of traversing, like, for example, like a larger continent or a larger island or something like that, in a 2D platforming setting, because there would be so much dead space where you just walk around from left to right or right to left or up and down, and it's not a very interesting thing. So you abstract this stuff out, you kind of obliterate time and space, so and abstract basically it in like some kind of cave system or whatever, but it obviously also detaches you from the sense of like the overall space. And for a long time I was leaning more towards that and kind of emphasizing that part, because like you can also, like with that kind of thought, you can also do something like Dark Souls 2 did, where sometimes time and space are so detached from one another that it just doesn't make any sense, which is also interesting. But considering, and this is like also like the tagline and all that kind of stuff, that I really want this game more to be about a group of people who are traveling through a world that is completely stuck in time, and are trying to find a way to create a future for like themselves and the place that they are inhabiting it. I felt like in order to properly communicate this stuff, I need to show more of what this space is, and creating an overworld in that context helps me do that, because there's a difference between like traversing several screens on like in a cave system or whatever, and then being in a different part of like a cave system or suddenly in a castle or whatever, and walking across a continent and seeing different like landscapes, biomes and things like that, even if these biomes are just like basically window dressing. There's like a difference when you depending on how you traverse these spaces, which is why I decided, okay, and this is like an idea I had like very, very early on and ditched, and now I'm coming back to. It's like, let's do actual overworld progression, and also let's do most of the progression gating not within the platforming areas, but in the overworld. Kind of like, and this is like a different thing, or like a different thing I've been thinking about. Kind of like, for example, Final Fantasy V does it like fairly well. The first act in Final Fantasy V is basically you finding different modes of transportation that open up different parts of the overworld, where you then travel to, like, do a dungeon or two and then find a different thing of traversal, which enables you to access more areas and all that kind of stuff until you have the airship and have everything open to you. And this is like kind of the idea behind like how I want to gate progression in the game, like in Virtuous Heaven, without making it feel too artificial. Because the problem I had with the previous idea, also because I was refusing to limit the player's movement options, the problem I then had is, okay, and then how do you gate progression? I mean, I could also just not gate progression at all, but then you end up with something that can very easily be just an incoherent mess where people have no idea where they're supposed to be going and what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm not confident enough in my ability to make something like this interesting. So I kind of wanted to like have something that guides players along a line of like where their narrative beats happening that explain what's actually going on. So there's like some kind of actually also like a development of like, okay, hopefully that will hopefully give people a stake in what's happening and the story that I want to tell and all that kind of stuff. So this is why I'm going to build an overworld, or like it's planned to build one, and then put everything together, see how it goes, and also, as always, don't fall into despair in face of the sheer impossibility of everything. The plan originally was to have all of this stuff that I just mentioned be done until November 16th, because that's where the deadline is to submit games to the Independent Games Festival. I don't want to submit Witcher 7 to the IGF festival because I think, I might win something there. I can fairly confidently say that. Like, should that happen, I don't know. Probably not, but again, who knows? I'm trying to not be like overly cynical or pessimistic, but let's keep things in perspective and just assume like, no, that won't happen. But there's still a value in submitting games to festivals, even if you know, and especially if you can. Like me, I got a fee waiver, which is nice because I don't have to pay the submission fee, and you can basically do this for free. But like the reason why I want to like submit the game and like kind of still aiming for November 16th, though I'm very certain that I won't get everything done until then. The reason why I'm still shooting for this is because I want to use the deadline kind of as a way for me, like as a goal point, where I know, okay, try to have as most stuff as you can done by that point. And because this will force me to make definite decisions about things where I'm right now still uncertain about. This will force me to like stay on track for like what I now said this game is going to be. For example, like last week I suddenly had the idea, what if there are not like the like fighting enemies isn't just in the platforming context, but touching enemies will like create like a JRPG turn-based battle system. And sure, that sounds great. But also, I would like for this game to be done and out sometime next year. And now deciding, let's ditch all the like combat stuff that I built and do something completely different isn't really going to help me with that. So, and this is why I think having these like points in like these deadlines and like dates that you need to hit, and like kind of like external things also, like because of ADHD, and like having concrete deadlines that are not like in some nebulous point in the future, but like fairly close by, really helps you focus on the things that you need to be doing and not get distracted with, for example, other projects or like complete reworks of your game's battle system. I think this helps me and keeps me on track with that. And again, the more decisions that I'm now making that are final, the less this space to just go completely off into a different direction exists, and the more I am kind of forced to work with what I've built instead of completely imagining something new. So that's the reason why I'm still shooting for this. I think I can get most of the way there. The largest thing that is probably open here is building the boss for the first area. This will probably take a few days, just because of like the sheer amount of different things that you need to be doing, and obviously the overworld progression. But I'm pretty sure I can get something functional until then. It's probably not going to be very polished or like user-friendly in some aspects, aside from the things that I made for the EGX demo and that I'll just like carry over. But that's the plan. The next deadline point after November 16th is for me like whenever like the Steam Next Fest in February starts, because that's when I want to publish the next larger version of Virtuous Heavens, like of a demo version of Virtuous Heaven, which right now I think like I'm shooting for like having the tutorial area and the first 2 areas of the game being done at that point. Hopefully. Who knows how things go. I might just go back and say, okay, I will release a much more polished version of like what I'm building right now until like the IDF submission. Because again, this is like Steam Next Fest. Obviously, you're releasing a public demo, and that's a nice thing for players. But it's also an advertising instrument. So there's an argument to be made to have like something that is shorter but more polished and more like closer to like almost a commercial release or like something like that, than having something that is big, but in parts very rough to play, because then people will think, oh, this person just doesn't know how to make a game. No, it's just that they didn't get around to making these parts of the game nice and usable for people that aren't them. But yeah, that's kind of the plan anyway. Also, like trying, like another reason why I want this like first area at least to be completely done and finished and in some kind of presentable state is because I want to try and pitch this thing to publishers. Again, keeping in mind that I probably won't find any good offerings. I've gotten like some got in touch with bad offerings so far, but like who knows? Maybe something nice happens out of that. Because I'm also aware, like I'm just constantly thinking about or like wondering how much more you could be able to do if like some other folks would be working with me on this, because then you were able to concentrate on like very specific aspects of like what needs to be done. Like again, like think about the boss fight. A boss fight needs to be programmed. There needs to be like drawn and animated. This stuff needs to be connected to everything else. It needs to be polished. The battle system needs to have like elements to it that enables like that are interesting in some way. Ideally, it needs to be tested and then adjusted and maybe changed completely. Me doing stuff on my own, it means that I would have to do all of these things on my own, and that means that a lot of the time there's like a time limit on just a limit on how much time I can spend on things. And for example, making a boss fight, sure, I would probably have to change attacks and I occasionally do that, but very often it's more like, okay, it's working, it's not completely falling apart, and fighting it is interesting and nice. Maybe could have used a few more frames of animation, but that takes another 2 days, and I have like this other pile of stuff that needs to be done. So you end up just not doing it because there's like more work that is waiting for you, and you just don't have the time and resources to do so. So that's like a reason why I'm intending to do that. Again, once I finished that part, this is like probably something that will be going on, like basically will be running in the background for like the next few months, like where I'm trying to find something and just, but always working under the assumption that I like nothing will really come out of this. So I'll just like keep working with what I have right now and keep planning with what I have. And should this all change, I will adjust. I certainly have ideas on like how I could use like extra resources. I have a whole pile of them. Maybe then I have the time to change it into a turn-based battle system, which won't happen. It won't happen. I'm also saying it here because, oh my god, like sometimes the draw is so strong. Also because I've been thinking a lot about turn-based battle system and turn-based games. I have a whole concept for a turn-based strategy game that I hope to get around to once this game is done. But it's all very far in the future. But yeah, that's like the task, and as always, the final task, as with every month, is, and it's occasionally getting much harder. Not as much because of like how my life is going, but because, how everything else is going. Anyway, the last goal, as always, is to not fall into despair in face of the sheer impossibility of everything. and that certainly is a task that requires several hours per month. But anyway, that's kind of like where everything is going. Just realizing that I might need to change this end card at some point, but not today. So yeah, you can follow me at Mokograd on Twitter. I recently closed down my personal Twitter account, so that it's private, but I don't post on there anymore, but it exists anymore. If you want to have updates like for this game, please follow at Mokograd on Twitter. I'll still post like updates there and like occasional gifs from the game and all that kind of stuff. That's still happening. I'll just like personally don't exist on Twitter anymore, and it's kind of nice. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel for like updates and all that kind of stuff. And there's also an email newsletter that I plan to resurrect now, actually for real, which I'm not going to plug right now, but hopefully next month I can plug, hopefully, and if not, oh well. And also you can go to mokograd.net, which is my personal website, which has a blog and all that kind of stuff. And with my like personal like removal from Twitter, I plan to do more like through these channels, maybe do more videos. Who knows? Once I can find a good format to do these, and write more blog posts. And I like and kind of use the opportunity to just like ditch like a whole basically social media or like public presence or like the main public presence that I had, and like do something else and do maybe something that I enjoy more doing than just like yelling on Twitter. But anyway, for like just like general updates and announcements, all that kind of stuff. And if you have a Twitter account still, you can follow at Mokograd on Twitter, obviously. You can wishlist Virtuous Heaven on Steam. You can also follow the Steam page where you also get like updates on your like Steam app and whatever, like for announcements and all that kind of stuff, because like I also share the video, these videos on Steam over there. So like if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, you can do all these things. So I didn't disappear off the face of the internet, just like I left the platform wasn't all that comfortable being on. Aside from, again, like this one thing, because like you sometimes have to make some kind of compromise. Anyway, that's been it. I hope you all have a nice November. I hope ensuing eternal darkness for the next 2 to 3 months isn't like all that rough on you. And yeah, see you next month, or see you next month, I guess. Anyway, goodbye.